It's a little later than I intended, but it's late Tuesday night. I spent a little bit of time yesterday and a little bit of time tonight getting some of the engine bay wiring finished up and correcting a mistake I almost made. I forgot with the Dakota dash. Of course, we were going to have no exciter wire for the alternator. So I don't know how well you'll see it, but there's now a light bulb up under here. Well, yeah, you can't see it, but there's a light bulb going from switched ignition, and then that goes on the brown exciter wire, which is, right here. That will go to the field terminal on the alternator because we've got this 12 SI, and you got to turn it on. But unfortunately, if you're not thinking about it and you go and do that and you don't have a diode or a light bulb, when you try to turn your car off, you're not going to turn your car off because the alternator will actually backfeed and keep the car running. So that's, well, actually in this case, because we have the fuel injection, I'm sure it would actually shut off and it'd be just fine, but let's do it correctly. Let's see. So you can see a lot of the engine harness is now run. All of the wires that tap off that coil to power it, to control it, we have the Pertronics ignition in here, so that's one set going on the coil. The cruise control needs an RPM signal. The tach inside needs an RPM signal. This, of course, is the filter for the tach for the Easy EFI, which also needs to know the RPM. So quite a few wires on the coil, as you can see right here. Got them all nicely protected. I'm really digging this cloth wrap. You'll note I'm using Expando everywhere else. Not using my traditional vinyl harness tape. I haven't actually used any in this job. But yeah, this newer material I'm pretty happy with. It's very easy to work with and it's very strong. So all I've got left on the engine harness is right here. I've got the main power feed to the fuse box. Will go down through a fusible link off the stud on the alternator. I've got the fusible link from the alternator to that stud, and then this wire, which I'll have to build. All of these wires, the purple wire, which of course is the starter trigger, the feed to the fuse box, and the feed from the alternator, they're going to go down along the transmission tube in one of those. Over there I had a heat tube for them to slide down. They'll probably also be wrapped. I really like to protect them. You can see where the old wire still is, because I haven't pulled that out yet because I got to loosen a bolt to get that out. The starter is actually laying on the floor over here. It was kind of in our way, so we'll deal with that. And then that makes the stud on the starter your power distribution point. Instead of, if you're familiar with F-bodies, there is a thing called the splice that would be over in that fender bay coming from the horn relay, and then a big splice and a bunch of solder wrapped up in a harness. That would be your main distribution point traditionally. Now we will use the stud to the starter. So then, of course, the heavy gauge battery cable will then feed the battery with very little loss from the alternator, and then the alternator, of course, is feeding on a pretty large wire as well. So yeah, this works out really nice with their systems. The one downside to their systems, of course, is you have to have an internal regulated, 10 SI, 12 SI, or go to like a CS 130 or a 144, which of course, means a little bit of modification and getting things to line up. We had already done a 12 SI conversion on this vehicle, only back then we still had the voltage regulator sitting on the wall, and I don't think I have it open, but when you do that mod, you can use some of the existing wiring, and then you just bury a light bulb. So I gut that out, and then there's the light bulb that would drain it back down. So very nice to have. So that one's actually going to go to another 69 that isn't getting all the wiring updates, but is getting a newer alternator. So then, you know, it looks correct. So we will keep that. What else has been run? Obviously, the Easy EFI is run now. The temperature gauge, you know, for the Dakota is now run, and I found a spot I liked for it. You can see everything's all nice and tidy back in there. Everything's in. You can get at the headlight relays. The wiring for the horns are now run. And I'm really happy with the wiring for the AC compressor. That came in really, really nice. And there is the circuit breaker that will come off of the battery terminal for the positive terminal, go through that 30 amp breaker. And then that actually comes around, follows the looming location that's stock, comes around to that power distribution point. And right now it's only feeding, you know, high beam, low beam, but could be useful for other things that you want to feed full-time battery to. So let me go set this back down. So yeah, there's actually not much wiring left to do. I was already kind of hoping to be testing some stuff before I buried that, but we're still dealing with the radiator setup and everything, so I'm not going to put the battery tray in and get that in the way until I'm happy with hoses and everything, because that's just easier to do with this location wide open. So I've got some stuff I can do without having to worry about that. And then I've still got to fab a nice little tray over there to keep those wires from ever hitting those headers. Yeah, and at some point pick the car up, plug the O2 in, and a couple cables to run down below, including these. Yeah, oh, and then one other thing we're going to do is, while it's all apart and out, I'm going to change the way the distributor is set up right now, make it so that little window there that would normally be for adjusting your points, I'm going to try to kind of hide that behind it a little bit, kind of make it look like it's not there. So that's just one of the other things to monkey with. This particular windshield wiper, which I did build a harness for, you can see it's all nice. You can barely even notice it's there. The pump on this one is not known to work, so at some point we're probably pulling that one apart and rebuilding the pump. So I'm not going to worry about routing hoses just yet, but I think that will come up. And then once everything in the car is working, then I will get the cowl induction setup working. The switch is down there. I don't know if you can actually see it on there, but the switch is down there. We're gonna have to find out if it actually works and everything. If not, I think I have another one in that box over there. I do know that I have the correct relays and everything in that box for the cowl. So we'll get that working. I'm also going to move that ground strap because it looks like it has touched the header a few times. There's some marks on that header tube. So I don't really like that. We'll just make that a better fit. This ground strap is looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that one. I do want to also add a brace. You can see that white tape on that large convoluted tube. That is for the Easy EFI factory harness, you know, from Fast. I think I'm gonna come up with a little loop clamp or something to hold that up so that it's not rubbing on anything. I know it's in the tube, but makes me nervous. But until all the wiring is checked out and working as much as possible, I'm not going to pack the grease in the connectors, because you usually pack them with dielectric grease to kind of keep any moisture that kicks up out of from causing any trouble. Next thing you know, you got wipers turning on whenever they want or whatever problem you have. Don't want any gremlins. So before we do that, or once we do that, we'll get the brake booster going back in, because hopefully by then he'll know what he wants to do with the kick panels. So I can put the e-brake in, which is a lot easier to do without that brake booster there. There's two nuts on the back, so some studs from the e-brake, which is always fun to get in there, stick out. And there's two studs way down there that'll stick out that you've got to slide two screws on, and it's not even fun to do without the booster there. Let's see, those studs are on the back here. Yeah, you can see them right there. They'll stick through the firewall. And we did wire for the e-brake as well, for that switch. So there is a wire for that. He's under there. That's the brown one sitting there next to those speaker wires that we got to figure out what we're going to do with once we know what we're doing with the kick panels. So the wiring is pretty much wrapping up. I know it's taken forever, but, you know, had to do real work, and life just happens that way. Plus, he hasn't really needed the car this summer. But, you know, it's going to have to go back in storage here soon, so let's get that wrapped up. So there's a nice long update on Sweet Pea.